people reject reality, and that this has all kinds of dangerous implications. But I think also a positive note is that people like whimsy and like legend and lore. They want to keep these questions alive because it just creates more stories, and that's such a human thing to me.
In 2022, a roadside attraction known as the Georgia Guidestones was blown to smithereens by an unknown assailant. Financed anonymously in 1980, the Stonehenge-esque monument presented 10 mysterious guidelines to safeguard the future of humanity and sparked controversy over its potentially satanic messages. But what was the true intention of this anonymous donor, and who would have the misguided passion to pull off such an explosive crime? For this episode, Tyler McBrien, host of the excellent new podcast, Who Blew Up the Guidestones, takes me through the story from the beginning and shares the wild threads he has uncovered through his meticulous investigation, which seeks to finally figure out the truth behind this kitschy yet consequential small-town mystery. I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. I am so excited for this one. I am so excited to welcome Tyler to the show. I think we're going to just really bring you all an episode that you're going to love. This is just perfect American Hysteria fodder. So thank you for coming on, Tyler.
Chelsey, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it seems like a perfect marriage of interest. The Venn diagram is a circle here, I think.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, it just feels really like classic to the things that we love to cover. So I am a big fan of this show. At this moment of the recording, you've got 4 episodes out, and it's just been such a pleasure to listen to them. And, I love an investigation. I would love to be doing investigative podcasts, but, my investigations just go a little bit different and just stay right on my computer. But I love you getting out there and just really exploring a topic that's a lot richer than I think we would expect. So I'm hoping before we get into a lot of the other stuff, let's just explain to our listeners exactly what the Georgia Guidestones are, and then kind of just very briefly what happened in 2022. And of course, we'll expand a lot on that as we go forward.
Yeah, of course. It's a richer story than even I was suspecting. And so there's a lot of like pit stops we make and side quests. And so we can get into some of that too. But from a very sort of high level, the Georgia Guidestones were a very strange, mysterious monument in Elbert County, Georgia, which is the northeast part of the state. It's a fairly rural area known for its granite industry. They call themselves the granite capital of the world. And the story goes that in 1979, a man came to Elbertton, using a pseudonym. The pseudonym is R.C. Christian, and he had very detailed plans to make a grand granite monument, 20 feet tall, weighing over 200,000 pounds, cost a good bit of money to make. And he did it. He funded it with the help of the local granite finishers and carvers and quarrymen and craftsmen. Built this huge monument. It was unveiled in 1980, and it was beautiful. It looked sort of like an American Stonehenge, as what some people called it. But it immediately became the source of controversy because of what was inscribed on the actual stone tablets,
which we will get into.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
But there were 10 sort of precepts along with other instructions. A lot of it was very esoteric language and a little obscure. But the first commandment said, maintain humanity under 500 million. So it's maintain humanity under 500 million. And, even in 1980, you don't have to do a lot of math to realize that, a lot of people would have to die or something to reach that. And so it attracted all kinds of conspiracy theories and hatred from evangelical groups, all the way up to, let's say, QAnon and even beyond. And so then in 2022, on July 6th, the very early morning hours, someone blew them up. And those two mysteries of who was R.C. Christian and who created the Guidestones and then who blew them up are the mysteries that bookend this investigation that has become Who Blew Up the Guidestones.
Yes, yes. And yeah, I know the solution to one of those, it appears, as long as, the reporting in the first 4 episodes is accurate. But I want to talk about you really fast. And what made you decide to just undertake such a mission to solve this mystery? Like, what's your personal relationship to this story?
Yeah, great question. I grew up in Georgia. I grew up in a suburb of Atlanta, and I would go to a Jewish summer camp actually in North Georgia, not too far from the Guidestones. So I'd heard about them, I think, originally from my sister. And it made sense to me that they were in North Georgia. There's actually, we released a bonus episode today about this place called Paradise Garden that was made by a folk artist named Howard Finster, unrelated to the Guidestones, but also in North Georgia. And growing up, I went to Paradise Garden a few times, and I was very just so fascinated by this man, Howard Finster, who I think in his 50s, with only a 6th grade education, just decided to become a painter and just built these monumental works of art as if just driven by something. And I've always been interested in that, like people like prophets or people who have visions and are just driven to make things. And that seemed similar to me with the Guidestones. And so I was really interested. And then when they blew up in 2022, I was kicking myself because I never actually visited them in person. And so I think part of it is kind of like, reconstituting it or something for myself. And then, who doesn't love a good mystery? And this had 2 mysteries. It seemed just like a very Georgia story that I'd always just never could let go.
Yeah. You did a little bit of this, but I really want to just set the scene as much as possible of where the Guidestones are located and the vibe around them. I know you've talked about the granite industry, but what else can you tell us about kind of the area that these Guidestones were built, maybe why you think they were built there, and how the town kind of interpreted this really strange thing coming through and staying for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, the setting is really one of the things that kept me hooked on the story as well. My producers kept having to pull me back from just making this show about the granite industry in Georgia because it was super fascinating.
That's called context. We love context.
Exactly. It's really fascinating because Elbertton has, I think, over 100 granite finishing sheds, which are the places where you shape the granite, and it has dozens of quarries. It has this incredible history dating back to the 1890s. There's this really interesting story we get into of a statue called Dutchy, which was unveiled in the late 1890s as a memorial to the Confederate war dead. But after 2 years, people in town actually pulled it down. And I was like, wow, what an amazing story of this like early history of pulling down a Confederate monument. But in fact, it was because it didn't look Confederate enough. It looked too much like a Union soldier. Right. So there goes my like Pollyanna-ish views.
Yep, your great hope. Yeah.
But it's super interesting because this town makes 2/3 of the headstones in the country, for example. So I talked to people who all day they just blast the death dates on top of headstones. Wow. And there's just so much like legend and lore in town that people love to play up because a lot of it's really fun. Like when you enter town, the first thing you see is this sign that says Elbertton, granite capital of the world. And then a few just sample headstones of like, what they sell and what they make.
There's sample headstones, right? When you enter town. Okay,
yes, exactly. Kind of and it's like the first thing you see. And then there's like a local legend where it's like this one guy was driving in late at night and there's fog everywhere and he sees his own name on the headstone like a town, and then he dies on the spot.
That's like classic urban legend stuff. Yeah,
oh my god, exactly. Great. And it's like it's perfect for this town. The mayor's name is Mayor Graves. Like I literally can't make this up. It's too much.
Wow.
And then to top it all off, and this is probably it's like bread and butter for this show, is that a lot of the people who made the Guidestones are Freemasons. They just do it because they're in masonry, and so they, a lot of them have like a Freemason ring on, and I just get the sense that a lot of people maybe don't have secrets, but they wanted me to think they had secrets, which was honestly kind of added to the challenge, but also a lot of the fun of it. So yeah, Elbertton, I really encourage listeners who are driving through, even though the Guidestones are gone, to go to Elbertton still. You can still go to the field where they were. It's just an amazing, unique town.
Yeah. Is there any piece of like historical lore that you had like a particular fondness for, beyond, of course, the gravestones and the name on the gravestones, because that's pretty good. But I didn't know if there was any like events from the past that really shaped the town, because you said there was like, this dark sense there.
Yeah, well, Duchy is definitely an incredible historical anecdote, and we actually do another bonus episode about Duchy. There's two things. First, there is an incredible museum in town. It's the Elbertton Granite Museum. Everything is filled with granite history. You can see how it's manufactured, made, but then also these interesting quirks of the town that made it sort of insulated from some parts of history. So, for example, the Great Depression, I got the sense that it was fairly insulated from that and from other economic shocks. But what was really interesting is there's an African-American museum in town, and it's connected to an African-American cemetery, which is maybe the first or one of the first cemeteries in the United States where Black people could have like nice granite headstones because there was so much granite. It was plentiful, and so it was more affordable. Yeah. And so there's these beautiful, gravestones. And yeah, it just seemed like sometimes like out of step with history, and then sometimes directly tracking with history.
Sure. Do you think that was why this location was chosen? Because it is essentially a roadside attraction. And, that's a gross oversimplification, but, part of the idea is that people come and visit it. And I'm just really like wondering, and maybe you still are too, why this place was chosen.
Yeah, and the randomness of it is one of the drivers of the legends as well, I think. I think there's some very simple reasons. One is that this is where a lot of the granite was manufactured and made. Sure. It was a lot cheaper at the time than more traditional homes of granite industries like in Vermont or in the Northeast. I think around 1980, it was just more economical probably for this individual to make it there. And then same thing with transportation costs, just 200,000 pounds of granite. They were probably like, let's just make it here. So I think there's some like material reasons there. But what people in Elbertton would tell you is that it could only have been made there. That's where all the artisans were. Everything was hand carved in different languages. And, it's really funny. This kind of goes back to your last question. I was reading some of the archival coverage from the time of the unveiling, and a lot of people in town were a little skeptical of them, but sort of had like a live and let live attitude toward them. Like the local pastor, they asked him whether they were satanic or something. And he was like, pivoted because he wanted to talk about the sale of pornography in gas stations or like beer on Sundays or something. So it was, the biggest problem they had at first it was in the middle of a cow pasture and cows were like defecating on them. So they, they didn't really like have this aura until like a few years later. Because I think for the time they were just this beautiful thing that someone's dad or someone's uncle or something worked on.
That's so interesting because I would expect, based on what you already mentioned, the population decrease, and as well as some of the other messages, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. But it's kind of nice to know that it was, at least for a while. So let's get into the inscriptions. Do you think we can kind of start at the last and go up to the top, which we already know, but I think we can build to it and it'll add to the strangeness of the depopulation message. So would you take us through those and we can kind of talk about them as we go along?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So these are also in different languages, like a lot of different languages repeated next to one another, right?
Yeah, exactly. So just to give your listeners a visual, there's essentially 4 rectangular slabs whose corners are pointing toward a central pillar, and then there's a capstone on top. So in total, it's 6 very large slabs of solid, thick granite. And the 4 sort of panels that are rectangular are the ones that are inscribed. And the languages are English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, traditional Chinese, and Russian. And I think they were chosen because they represented the most of humanity in terms of speakers, except for, I believe he mentioned that he chose Hebrew because of its connections to Christianity and Judaism.
Okay.
He being R.C. Christian, the creator. There's also like a granite tablet on the ground with further instructions of what these are for. And then we also have a lot more information because R.C. Christian, the pseudonym, published a sort of manifesto, which is a wild and at times very unsavory read. But yes, to go back, so I can just read them from the bottom to the top. And a lot of them are sort of kind of beautiful and like sort of, some of them are innocuous. And then, we get to the last one. So here goes. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature.
Does it say it twice?
Yeah, it says it twice. With
it's important.
M dashes, actually. Number 9, prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite.
Hey, that sounds great, doesn't it?
Sounds good to me, yeah.
Love that message, yeah.
In fact, a friend who was, obviously listening to the show, she texted me in all caps, seeking harmony with the infinite, my next tattoo. And then about 30 minutes later, she texted back, wait, no, I will never get that tattoo. I'm so sorry. I should have listened to the end.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So number 8, balance personal rights with social duties. Pretty good advice.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
I think we're getting better here. The next one is avoid petty laws and useless officials.
All right.
Timely.
Yeah, it's feeling like a little libertarian at this point, but
fair.
Still nice. Yeah, okay.
Next one is let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court.
Hey, okay.
Yeah, no, we're kind of all over the map.
That can go either way, That could be good, that could be bad. All right.
Now we have protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts.
Mm-hmm.
Or the same, I think. Next one is rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason.
All right. Very Masonic.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of reason and
rationality. Yeah.
Exactly. Now we're moving up. Number 3, unite humanity with a living new language.
Interesting. It's kind of getting into like the religious at that point. It's like a reverse Tower of Babel situation or something where it's like we need to get back to having one common language after we were all split apart in a million directions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Next one, number 2. And here's where we're getting a little, I'll just say it, eugenicsy.
Yep.
Number 2 is guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. I think usually fitness here is a bit of a social Darwinian red flag for me.
Yeah. It's like a record scratch moment where you're reading them and you're like, okay, I like this. And then, and it's like a jump scare in a haunted house. Yeah.
And then boom, the last one, maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature.
Yeah. It's pretty intense. I mean, it's a really intense message for a town to accept. And it is really interesting that, I just wonder if nobody really paid a ton of attention to what it was saying and was just like, this is exciting. We've got a big ass granite monument in our town. Like we've got the Stonehenge, because it really, it does remind me of Stonehenge. Like it does feel like that's an apt comparison for sure. More after this. And now back to the show. I wanted to compare this to something in my own growing up. Have you ever heard of Afterglow Vista in Washington State?
No, I never have.
It's also known as the Mausoleum, but it's this place in the woods on San Juan Island in Washington State, a place called Friday Harbor. And you basically walk through this old graveyard, 1800s, early 1900s. That's old for Washington. And it's very creepy and weird and wrought iron fences. And you keep walking through the woods and eventually you just come upon this wrought iron sign that says Afterglow Vista. You go inside and it's this like circular, like Roman looking monument with like a bunch of columns. One of the columns is intentionally broken. And then in the middle, it's like an open, like iron dome at the top, and then there's like a table with chairs, like cement chairs all around, and each chair has like the birth and death date of a different family member, and it's actually like a tomb for the entire family. Same thing, Masonic messages, symbolism. And, growing up, it was like the stories were that the whole family had died in like an island plague, and except for the man who built it. So the broken pillar was him and the missing chair was him. All bullshit. It's just like a guy wanted to make this like Masonic messaging, right? Which is all pretty innocuous. We have a very twisted, warped view of what Masons actually are that's just pretty boring. But same kind of thing. This like vagueness that can really just spit out a million different things depending on the person who is witnessing it and thinking about it. So I was thinking about that so much throughout this, and it was nice to remember because I do love that place. My friends and I would go there. We had a seance there. We're probably haunted forever. But thinking about that seance, you do talk about the kind of people that would show up in town wanting to see this monument and the reaction of some of the locals. So when you were talking to locals, what was the story about who these Guidestones were attracting and kind of who were they actually attracting to?
Yeah, well, first of all, I've never heard of Afterglow Vista. It's, I think, a really good comparison because of what you're saying of this vagueness and there's a bit of like a woo aspect to some of the Guidestones inscriptions. And it's like, I guess in common parlance, it's almost this like mysticism slop in a way of this, mashing together totally. Of different traditions. Yeah. I mean, it was built in 1980. Like the guy is of our time and our world. And just really quickly, there's also connections, if your listeners are familiar with Rosicrucianism, or maybe if you've looked into it at all, it's this sort of esoteric sect of Christianity that is very concerned with nature and the natural order, and then, similarly human impact on the world. And there were a lot of connections, I believe, between Masonic thinkers and Rosicrucian scholars dating back centuries. And so you can tell this person is like drawing on certain traditions. I mean, RC Christian, Rosicrucian, I think it's not like oh my God. I think it's like he's intentionally referencing.
Oh, that's very clever. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't get that at all. That's cool.
And then the last thing I'll say before talking about, the stories we heard about people who would visit is that RC Christian writes in his manifesto that he was very inspired by megaliths like Stonehenge. But he thought that their biggest flaw was that we don't know what they were for because nothing is written on them. So he went through, great pains to write explicitly what the Guidestones are for, only for people to then make up a million conspiracy theories about what they're actually for, which is, I think.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. People who listen to this show probably will understand why.
Oh, they sure do. Yeah.
But yeah, we heard all kinds of stories. The Guidestones really only stood for 42 years, but there's one man who's in the first episode. His name is Hudson Cohn. He was there since day one. He was actually the editor of the Elbertton Graniteer, which is the Granite Industries magazine, which is more interesting than it sounds probably.
This granite thing is actually really interesting.
Okay, good.
I love a niche topic like that. I want to go to this museum for sure.
Yeah, my friends have said I'm very granite pilled, so I think that's
Hey, I get it.
Yeah, he was saying that there were a lot of Wiccans and witches who would come do different ceremonies with the Guidestones as a backdrop. People would film rap videos. Kids would have parties there. It's kind of like the spectrum of human experience around Elbertton. Everyone kind of found something interesting. Something that didn't make it into the show is that someone had alerted me of a now defunct cult down the road called the Onaxis cult. So if anyone knows about the Onaxis cult, please get in touch because there isn't much out there. So they were attracted to the Guidestones. They were in the next county over. Okay.
Do we think this cult was real? Because I'm always I'm a skeptic with cult stories, but at the same time, there are cults everywhere. It's not necessarily like a satanic human sacrificing cult, but I guess maybe we'll hear from people if this cult's out there.
Yeah. And I mean, your episode on cults was, it's a great point of we use the term cult pretty fast and loose.
Yeah.
But these people there was at least 2 leaders because I found one court document about them and they did have at least some followers. But, it could have been 10 people or something.
I mean, it would make sense that a cult would want to hang out at these Guidestones. It's pretty perfect for sure.
Exactly. So then, so it was basically a lot of just harmless, innocuous things. We were able to obtain incident reports from the local police dating back to about 2020 of all of the incidents that were recorded at the Guidestones. Some of them were pretty dark. One person attempted to take their own life there, and they're okay. But it kind of, runs the gamut. It was a lot of vandalism, a lot of spray paint. But because of that, there were surveillance cameras. And so the local emergency services center would monitor them and report any suspicious activity or vandalism.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's a perfect segue into what everyone wants to hear about is when This shit got blown up. I mean, it's a wild story. And you know what? Before we get into that, let's talk about RC Christian's beliefs. And let's talk about how you found out that story, because I think even the investigation part is really interesting and the other people that were involved. So yes, let's at least understand the man behind the stones, and then we will talk about blowing them up.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts. And I can go more into this part of it because it's sort of the first half of the series. As I mentioned, the Guidestones, when I started the project, these two mysteries were no one knows who built them, no one knows who blew them up. But as I was reporting this, there was an article written by an amazing journalist named Thomas Lake, who he himself had found this sort of fringe documentary made by two evangelical filmmakers who aren't very well known in mainstream media, but who had seemingly solved the first mystery of who R.C. Christian was. So Thomas Lake decided to run down what they did and kind of re-report the whole story, and came to the conclusion that these guys did it. They solved it. The documentary is called Dark Clouds Over Elbertton. It's a great watch. It's a little hard to find, but what they found was back in 2010, I think, they visited Elbertton to speak with a man named Wyatt Martin. Wyatt has since passed away, but at the time, Wyatt was the only person alive at the time to know R.C. Christian's true identity. He was the banker in town who helped finance the project. And so he needed to know legally, financially, R.C. Christian's real identity to see if this man could actually foot the bill.
Yeah.
He promised to take it to his grave, this secret. But in the course of this interview, they find that Wyatt has this computer case in his garage, and it's filled with letters from the real R.C. Christian. And they kind of cajole him. It's a bit of an uncomfortable watch because this man is very old and he's seemingly alone, and they sort of push him into it.
Because he really does want to keep it a secret. It's like a promise situation. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of like he wants to honor it. Once I learned who R.C. Christian was, I think I'd be less inclined to honor this man's requests. But essentially all the cameraman gets is just a flash of a corner of a letter. And it's just an address. It's not even a name, in Fort Dodge, Iowa. And so they just need that thread, and they start pulling out that thread. They eventually figure out it's a man named Herbert Kirsten, which sounds, a bit like R.C. Christian.
Yeah, sure.
And everything just starts checking out. Herbert Kirsten was himself an inventor, a naturalist, very concerned with population control problems and Malthusian ideas. And he has extensive correspondence with a man named William Shockley, who is one of the leading American eugenics movement, people of the 20th century. He donated to David Duke's presidential campaign, or maybe Senate campaign, and David Duke being the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
So yeah, really just not great people, to say the least.
Yeah, and pretty unexpected. I mean, maybe we would expect it, right, based on the first one, but I mean, it was surprising to me. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that. Yeah,
no, I completely agree. I had a similar feeling. One of the most interesting scenes, I think, in the series is there's a pastor from the nearby county. His name's Pastor Clint Harper. He goes to the Elbert County Commission one day and tries to argue for the Guidestones removal because they espouse genocidal ideas. And, after I learned who Herbert Kirsten was, I'm like, well, he's kind of got a point there.
Sure.
It's a very dark monument once you learn about those ideas. And I think that goes to also right now the Guidestones are no one knows the location of their remnants. People I've spoken to want to either restore them or something. And I think if they were to be restored, they should be contextualized. People should know that these are what they mean, and the person behind them had these beliefs. I truly don't think that they should just be put back up if they even could be as they were now that we know what we know.
Yeah, let's pop them in a museum.
Yeah, exactly. Like Dutchy. Exactly.
Yeah. Uh-huh. That makes sense. Okay, thank you for that. So we have a weird eugenicist, possible white supremacist who made these Guidestones, and we don't know if that's the reason that they got blown up necessarily. I mean, at least up until this point, which is the great mystery of this conversation, is we don't know who did this. So can you describe the scene that was shown to you in the security footage that you were able to see? Just show us what this night looked like when they finally blew up.
Yeah, and I'll first say that there was surveillance footage released. Some of the surveillance footage was released to the public the day after they were blown up.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of this footage was stripped of its context. There was no timestamp. Some of it was weirdly sped up. A lot of it was very pixely. So I'll give away
which
one.
Is creepy.
Yeah, it was, which adds to the ambiance. Yeah. Exactly. I'll give one small spoiler is that through some reporting, we were able to acquire the raw footage. And so we saw new angles and new context, but it's very eerie. There's 3 different cameras at 2 different timestamps. So the first one you see, the Guidestones themselves are lit up, but it's at night. So it's about 3:50 a.m. You see some lightning in the distance, actually, which is like really adds to the whole vibe. There is really sound, perfect. So you hear like some crickets or something. It's July 6th, so it's summer. Think like warm Georgia summer. There's a dark tree line, and you just see this darkly dressed person emerge out of the tree line, carrying what looks like a large cooler, and there's clearly some weight to it because they're bracing it on their legs as they walk. Mm-hmm. They sort of walk slowly up to the monument. This person puts the cooler down, and they are blocked now by a large panel of one of the Guidestones pieces. Then you see them without the cooler almost saunter or sort of skip back to the tree line.
They're just so excited.
Yeah, that's what I was. I mean, I assumed so as well. That ends, and then the timestamp jumps about, I believe, 12 or 13 minutes, and just seemingly out of the blue, there's a massive explosion. White smoke goes up. There's dust. There's debris flying everywhere. You hear it. It's quite loud. Almost immediately, you hear a car engine, and you see a silver car race across the screen, which must have been the getaway car. And that's all you see. And so you see that from a few angles, those 2 scenes of the person walking up, putting it down, and then the explosion, and then the car zooming by.
It's incredibly cinematic.
I know.
With the light. I mean, this would make a really good movie, I feel like. Maybe that's the next thing that needs to happen, because this is a very special story. So you did talk a little bit about the pastor who came to the meeting. And I know that he, with his like strong, serious desire to have these removed, that kind of made him a little bit of a suspect. And the other person that you talk about is a politician. Can we talk a little bit about this lovely woman who entered this story?
I would love to. Absolutely. So I believe you are referring to a woman named Candace Taylor.
I am.
And episode 5 it will be out on Tuesday, April 7th. And it's called Jesus, Guns, and Babies.
Because, so excited. Yeah.
As some people may already know, Candace Taylor in 2022 was running for the Republican nomination for Georgia governor. And her campaign bus had her platform emblazoned on the side, and it just said, Candace Taylor, Jesus, Guns, Babies. So you definitely saw her coming.
The Holy Trinity.
Exactly. But the reason why she's now associated so closely with the Guidestones is that as part of her campaign, she made 10 videos of 10 executive orders she would enact on day 1 if elected Georgia governor. And she sort of is clearly building up to something. And on the 10th video is all about how she would take down the Guidestones on day 1 because she uses the term made by a Luciferian cabal. And it's an amazing video. I definitely encourage people to go watch it. There's this like cinematic drone footage of the Guidestones. She talks about the Tower of Babel, actually, which we were talking about earlier.
Well, there we go.
She mentions that the Guidestones are 666 miles from the UN headquarters, which goes to this globalist, satanic conspiracy that's apparently behind the Guidestones. And she's very, she comes from I almost said the QAnon tradition, but elevating it a little too much, I think. But she has a QAnon background, and she was immediately pointed at when the Guidestones were blown up that either she did it or someone who followed her did it. I will say she granted us a couple interviews for the show, and these are the first time really she's spoken on the record with a reporter about the Guidestones since the explosion. And
that's so surprising.
Yeah, wow. To her point was that. And take this with a grain of salt. She has said some pretty outlandish things, but her defense here was like, I was actually trying to remove them legally by getting elected and then taking them down, which I think she has a point there. And she does have a very strong alibi. But, could she have been connected in some way? Someone inspired by her video? These are one of the lines of inquiry of the investigation.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that makes more sense than her actually like physically doing it herself. We saw that with QAnon. We saw it's not the person that created the story. It was someone who believed the story fervently that took such an action. And it's so weird because I'm talking to you and I'm like, maybe you know who did it. Maybe you don't. I don't know. You don't have to tell us. But I'm so excited to see where this goes. It's fun to be in the middle of something and talk to the person because, you get to choose what you reveal, just like you do as you go along in the show. So is there any other suspect that you want to talk about, or are those two kind of where you'd like to leave it?
Yeah, the great question. One of the challenges of this investigation is that there are so many suspects. You type in Guidestones on Facebook and there are hundreds of people celebrating their destruction, claiming that they did it. The town is literally filled with dynamite because they're all quarries. Yeah. It was like Clue. There are murder weapons everywhere, and there's so that was one of the difficulties. But I'll mention one more suspect that raised my eyebrows early on. So there's Clint Harper was the pastor, and this is all because of timing as well. It was about a month before the explosion, which was when Clint went to the county commission. Candace Taylor's video, I think, was only weeks before the actual explosion. And then there was a third person that I believe we hear about in the second or third episode. We went to the county and interviewed the head of the county and then the county manager. And they said that they had given the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, another name of a man who, it always makes me laugh, that's why I want to talk about it, is because 1 week before the Guidestones explosion, he came to the county, this man. They described him as a drifter. They ended up finding out he was sleeping in the basement of the local courthouse before the police found him and essentially kicked him out. But he went to the county manager and asked him whether there was any land in Elbert County that did not fall under the jurisdiction of any law enforcement. The subtext being like, where can I go do crimes? And he was sort of asking about the Guidestones land. And the guy and the county manager was like, oh, like, where are you living? And the guy said, oh, I'm only in town for a week and then I'm gone. And then a week later, the Guidestones explode. Who knows? They said they gave the name to the GBI and the GBI looked into this person. But I was like, it's like a supervillain telling everyone their plans before actually doing them.
It's like putting your monument 666 miles from. It's just like, man, we really ascribe so much ingenuity where maybe there isn't any. But that's a really interesting one because it does seem like, was it just for fun? Was it just like, I could blow something up right here and maybe not get in trouble? I mean, what if it turns out to be something that, not benign, that's not what I mean, but something without like this philosophy and this emotion behind it? I mean, that would be kind of just as wild. More after this. And now back to the show. So I think that for the sake of our show, there have been people that talk about the other types of conspiracies and paranormal things that happen here. I mean, now that we kind of understand, I don't want to give too much away. You've been so generous in telling us so much already, but I think it would be fun before we end to just get into some of the other things that potentially could have inspired this crime, or at least like built into the lore that made this monument so much like larger than life.
Yeah. To go back to, I think, your very first question, this goes to one of the reasons I've also been so fascinated with the Guidestones is that the 42-year history of the Guidestones perfectly maps onto the same 42 years in the history of U.S. conspiracy theories. I mean, it's whatever was the conspiracy theory du jour was also projected onto the Guidestones. So totally. Even from their beginning, I mean, I think that the idea behind the 500 million number really was the Guidestones were a guide for starting over after what they saw as an inevitable nuclear conflict between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. This is the height of the Cold War.
Yeah, it's 1980. So it's also the height of like the anti-nuclear movement, I would say, too.
Exactly. And which, has also connections to the environmental movement. And it's like in a similar, like milieu. I think that's why it says maintain. So I think the idea is that it's like already that low. But then you very quickly get into like satanic panic and, in the Reagan era. And that's when like evangelical Christians are much more prominent in politics, for example, in the late 80s, the 90s. And then you get into in like the late 90s, this New World Order, like World Trade Organization type of globalist, anti-globalization reaction.
A Timothy McVeigh kind of legacy.
Exactly. And that's projected onto the Guidestones. And you start hearing people accuse billionaires like Ted Turner or George Soros having built them. The Ted Turner thing, I think, is more connected to the anti-globalization. Soros is often just classic, like anti-Semitic conspiracies. And then you start to get to, there's one really interesting one that it's CERN, the Large Particle Collider, that it's like, there's a portal between where CERN is in Switzerland, I believe, to where the Guidestones are, because it's on the same latitude. Often when you look these things up, it's not the same latitude, or it's actually 664 miles from the UN headquarters.
Yes, thank you for that clarification.
I'll give it to him because that's pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. Sure.
That one I'll give Candace. I told her that. I was like, it's close enough. But the and then of course I think what really the inflection point is 2016 with QAnon moving to the mainstream. We speak with a really amazing reporter at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution who's been on this extremism conspiracy beat for a while. And he talks about how QAnon had this tendency to sort of eat other conspiracy theories. You can just kind of incorporate it. And the Guidestones were perfect for that. They were pretty prominent in the Georgia chapters of QAnon as sites of, child trafficking or all kinds of nefarious activities by the global elites. And then my other favorite, which you hear a lot in town, is about lizard people, which is, I think, these like reptilian aliens who actually run things, and that the Guidestones are either a landing beacon for UFOs or aircrafts connected to lizard people. But the lizard people one, I think, is pretty fun. And people around town, like, they talk about it, but they know that one's kind of ridiculous.
Totally. And there's like an alien situation a little bit too, right? And I imagine that the alien thing, which is lizard people adjacent, could have been a story of like aliens blew it up or something like that. I think it could really, you could really go in every direction, including who ended it, who blew it up. Okay, so I want to like end on this question, and we've gotten into it a little bit, but what have you learned about human nature from doing this story? And maybe what have you learned about your own nature through doing this story?
So much. Something that Thomas Lake, who I spoke about earlier, who found the documentary that actually we believe solved who R.C. Christian was, something that he told me early on in the reporting process is, I guess it's his reporting ethos or something, that he himself is I guess a devout man. He's very religious, and he likes to, I guess, meet people where they're at or take people seriously on what they believe. And because there's often some truth at the end, you have to pick it apart yourself and do your due diligence as a reporter, but resist a tendency for some like rationalist rejection of what people are saying. So for example, a lot of the evangelical groups who hated the Guidestones said that they were destroyed by lightning, because honestly, there was lightning in the videos and it did explode. And
you said it was like a high point. So
yes,
it's not
exactly.
impossible that lightning would do that. Yeah.
And I was like, well, okay, Thomas, that's ridiculous. But then when we spoke to a bomb expert later on, I won't give away too much, but the material that actually exploded the Guidestones, he said, because there was lightning, a static charge could have also detonated it. So it's almost like it could have, like, both theories actually could fit here. There is some possibility that it was lightning in the form of like static charge that set off so things like that, where I'm like, you know what, there's actually, I guess maybe not what I learned about myself is like kind of what I took away, what I should be doing. But the other thing about what I think I learned about human nature is that there's this like inevitability or inertia of conspiracy that I started to get the feeling about halfway through, that even if we found the person, we had a smoking gun, we had a confession, we had a conviction in court, a lot of people who listened would just kind of say, okay, sure, but what about, I feel like there's no way to convince everyone which, is bad in many ways. Obviously, it's this people reject reality, and this has all kinds of dangerous implications. But there is, I think, also a positive note is that people like whimsy and like legend and lore. They want to keep these questions alive because it just creates more stories. And that's such a human thing to me is, like an answer can be an ending sometimes. And people don't always want these stories to end, which is me trying to spin, find some silver lining to this eugenics story, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me that a monument attracts lore. Our monuments in this country are so confused and complicated and strange and specific to different types of people. So it makes sense that this could act as a conduit for these types of things, and that it just acts, to me, as far as I've heard, like a mirror to whoever is looking at it. And so many things are like that. And as you said, it can be really harmful. But, if nothing else, it's very interesting. So this was great. I really encourage our listeners to listen to your show. I think that it's so well reported, so interesting. And I can't wait to hear the rest of it. So thank you for being here, Tyler.
Chelsey, thanks so much for having me. I'm a big fan of your show as well. It just makes so much sense. I feel like this conversation and yeah, that was really great. I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. This was American Hysteria. Make sure you subscribe to Who Blew Up the Guidestones wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to find links to his podcast, find Tyler's website, or find him on social media, you can go to the links in our episode notes. If you love American Hysteria and want to support us to help make sure that this show can go on as long as we can possibly handle it, you can go to patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. You'll get ad-free episodes as well as bonus content, like the podcast that I make with our producer Miranda called Hysteria Home Companion, where we tell you stories related to the topics that we cover or stories that we know that you'll love. We have a big back catalog, so if you love American Hysteria, you can get a bunch more episodes covering the same kind of stuff right now at patreon.com/American Hysteria or by subscribing on Apple Plus. Another great way to help out our show is to leave us a 5-star review on whatever app you're using. You could do it right now. It's very easy and it really helps us out. If you go to AmericanHysteria.com, you can leave us a message on the Urban Legends hotline about a tale that you remember from growing up or one you've heard recently, and we might do an entire investigation about it. Also at AmericanHysteria.com, you can pick up some of our merch. 100% of the profits go to the Samir Project, a Palestinian-led mutual aid group in Gaza. American Hysteria's producer and editor is Miranda Zickler. Our associate producer is Riley Swedelius-Smith. This episode has additional editing by Kaylee Jasperson, and I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith. Thanks, as always, for listening, and I hope you have a great week.